This is Dantalian Jones. Hello. Today I'm going to discuss with you the topic of when to use negative emotions to influence and persuade. Now, at the end of this video, you'll be asked to click the like button because it's designed to be informative, it's entertaining mostly, and because you want to. As a general rule, using negative emotions to influence and persuade people is considered a bad thing. A very typical example of how negative emotions are used to influence people is with guilt and shame. These two negative emotions will often get a result that the persuader wants, but in the long run will make their subject feel bad, and the persuader is very likely to be seen in a very negative light. In my opinion, using guilt and shame is equivalent to emotional coercion. I will admit it's possible that there are situations where guilt and shame might be the best tools to influence somebody, but I won't discuss those here. An equally negative emotion is nagging. Think of nagging as a very loud, annoying bell that rings all the time until an action is performed. You will find that people respond very quickly to nagging, but will often dream of killing the person who is nagging them. Now, there are two negative emotions which can be, in fact, very useful to influence and persuade without destroying some part of the subject's fragile emotional ecology. Those two emotions are regret and urgency. At the end of this video, you'll have two language patterns that use regret and urgency so that you can see how powerful this can be. So stay with me here. These two negative emotions are useful because they can call someone to action, and it is this action that relieves the negative feeling. Let's take a look at regret. As a general rule, the difference between regret and guilt is that guilt is about feeling bad for something that you did, and regret is about feeling bad for something you did not do. Think about that. While you cannot undo things you feel guilty about, you can do things that will prevent regret and create real satisfaction. As a negative emotion, urgency is an uncomfortable feeling that is calling you forward into action. Therefore, it is that action that will relieve the urgency. Unlike nagging, urgency is best framed as a feeling that will satisfy a desire instead of a pain that screams for relief. Okay, how do you create regret? One way of creating regret is to emphasize the many opportunities that were passed up or ignored, and then focus on the mental process the person went through to say to themselves, maybe later. This calls to the person's attention that particular mental process, so they will recognize it again and then do something different. The best way to use regret and urgency is to first present the opportunity with all its benefits and state or imply a call to action. My personal preference is to then talk about things that are unrelated to the topic that describes regret and urgency. Say it almost as if I were thinking out loud, and then immediately just switch back to the topic. The reason for this interjection is so that the subject connects the regret and urgency on their own, so I don't have to explicitly state it. I wanted to promise you some examples of language patterns that effectively employ regret and urgency. This one is from the book The Sheltering Sky by Paul Bowles, and it seems to have an effect on everyone who reads it. Death is always on the way, but we think of life as an inexhaustible well. Yet everything happens a certain number of times, a very small number, really. How many times will you remember? A certain afternoon of your childhood, some afternoon that's so deeply a part of your being that you can't even conceive of your life without it. Perhaps 4 or 5 more times. Perhaps not even. How many times will you watch the full moon rise? Perhaps 20. And yet it all seems limitless. All right. The implied call to action here is to pay attention to the opportunities that are happening right now. Because after all, life is precious and you don't want to waste an opportunity that can fade away forever. Now, this second use of regret and urgency comes from the film Before Sunrise, where the character, Jesse, meets an attractive woman on a train and tries to convince her to spend the night with him as he walks the streets of Paris. And her response, initially, is to say no. And to this he replies, all right. Think of it like this. Jump ahead 10, 20 years. Okay, you're married. Only your marriage doesn't have that same energy that it used to have, you know? You start to blame your husband. You start to think about all those guys you met in your life and what might have happened if you picked up with one of them, right? Well, I'm one of those guys. That's me, you know. So think of this as time travel from then to now to find out what you're missing out on. See, what this really could be is a gigantic favor to both you and your future husband to find out that you're not missing out on anything. I'm just as big a loser as he is. Totally unmotivated, totally boring. You made the right choice and you're really happy. Now to that, of course, her reply is, I'll get my bag. This last example is very creative because he focuses on the possibility of a future regret. All right, now what can you anticipate in the next mind control video? I intend to show you how to create a compulsion, a want, even an addiction, and to use that to your advantage. If you want to learn more about language patterns, there's a link that you'll find below this video. Remember to like this video now and to share it with your friends because, like I said, it's informative, it's entertaining, mostly, and because I asked you.